The conflict in Anchorage was heating up. The communists had invaded. The year was 2072. And if you know the dates, that's 5 years before the bombs drop, right? The communists had invaded Anchorage. The Americans were trying to push them back out, the communists specifically being the Chinese. And the U.S. military was looking for a means to really stick it to the Chinese. And like the Americans do, they were looking for not only a way to capitalize on pushing them out, but to really make a statement. And their solution was, let's design the largest robot ever. This walking embodiment of democracy and capitalism that could come onto the battlefield and wipe the communists out, while also speaking the mantra of the people, basically. This is, I mean, obviously it's absolutely ridiculous, but it also represents just the attitude of the people of the time, and this idea of, I don't know, the rhetoric and the kind of the need for not only attacking the enemy physically with dual laser beams from the robot's head and nuclear bombs shooting out of the robot's back, but also for attacking the ideology of the enemy by spouting things like,
democracy will never be defeated.
Or maybe also,
democracy is truth. Communism is death.
Now, whether that messaging was more for the enemy or more to bolster and continue to, I don't know, influence the other military members of your own society is, maybe it's a little bit of both. That's up to debate. But this is how the robot functioned. So it was 2072. And, well, at least this is how the robot was planning to function. This was the plan, right? And the military got together with a few of the industries, the companies that you would expect, Robco and General Atomics International, in order to design and build the robot. But things didn't go to plan. They couldn't actually get the robot working how they wanted to. They tried to reach out to Vault-Tec to see if Vault-Tec could help, but Vault-Tec was too busy working on other things. And they also tried to reach out to the designer that they needed in order to get the power supply online, because they designed a robot that needed so much power to work the AI, the machine parts, like the walking, the physicality of the robot itself, because it was so large, but then also the weapons, the lasers and the mechanics of it, that they couldn't get all of the power they needed portable and working on the robot at the same time. And the only man that they realized that could help do this was Dr. Stanislaus Braun. And if you remember from the previous episodes, that name, Dr. Stanislaus Braun, was already in seclusion because Dr. Stanislaus Braun is the guy who was working with Vault-Tec designing the vaults, but he was also the guy that was ended up in the vault, in the VR vault. Remember Tranquility Lane? Remember the crazy guy that was pretending to be the little girl that was messing with the host of people stuck in the vault in Tranquility Lane? Remember that vault? That's Dr. Stanislaus Braun. And he was not available anymore because he was busy, secluded in Vault 112 in a VR simulation. And it wasn't until after he was already in that vault doing his thing that they realized the difficulty of the power supply. And at that point, I guess they couldn't reach out to him and he was no longer available. So they never finished the project to get Liberty Prime up and running by the end of the Alaskan campaign. So they threw a bunch of soldiers at it and, of course, solved it using power armor. But that didn't mean that things went as well as they had hoped. There was lots of loss of life. It took a lot longer than they had hoped in order to push the Chinese off of the American soil in Alaska. And poor Liberty Prime was left only functioning partially. The robot could walk. It could walk, it could talk, it could process. And this is another part of this. Remember, robots in Fallout have their own AI components. They are not simple machines. They have to have enough processing power to make complex decisions on their own. Think about Mr. Handy. Mr. Handy actually has a complex decision-making in calculations and things like that. Even for just doing the laundry and helping with the baby and, cooking dinner. It's processing things on a kind of nearly intelligent, self-aware kind of setting, to the point where some of them actually become kind of sentient, right? And they start really doing a little bit more than their processing is supposed to do. Well, Liberty Prime is very similar to that. Liberty Prime has a complex AI that's able to process and do things on a near human level of AI. So it could do all of those things as long as it didn't power up its weapons. And that was very frustrating to the robot. The robot didn't understand why it couldn't power up its weapons, but it could walk around and talk and do all of these other things. But as soon as it powered up its weapons, the other processes would go offline and all of a sudden it would power down or whatever, right? It was very frustrating. Like imagine if like every time you decided to like do a math problem, all of a sudden your leg stopped working, right? Like this would be super weird. You'd have problems doing things. So they turned off the robot and they hid it away underneath the Pentagon. One of the safest places they could think of. Okay, so we're going to stick it underneath the Pentagon in the Capitol, and we'll figure out this power solution on another day. Well, another day never came, because as we know, in October of 2077, the bombs dropped and everything went to hell. So let's fast forward 180 some years, 170 some years, 2255 in the Capitol Wastes. And this is during the events of Fallout 3. Owen Lyons, the leader of the Brotherhood of Steel, now over on the East Coast, arrives in Washington. And as happens so often with the Brotherhood of Steel, they discover something. And this is their job. I mean, this is what they're looking to do. They're looking to find remnants of the old civilization, old technology, and see how they can use it, and to keep it out of the hands of just common people who would misuse that technology. And this totally fits the bill. A giant robot, a giant intelligent robot designed to destroy communists. Now, imagine if somebody in the future, in 200-ish years almost, in the future, was to discover this and tinkering around was able to power the thing back up, even partially. And imagine if the AI core on this thing was broken and misunderstood who the communists were. The destructive power of this would have been very dangerous. Well, Owen Lyons understands what he's come across, and also the potential benefits to the Brotherhood. So for 20 years, they decide to undertake a project to recommission the robot, because this could be a great asset to the Brotherhood in the Capitol Wastes. And let's think back to Fallout 3. What are they dealing with in the Capitol Wastes? So not only we know they end up dealing with the Enclave. The Enclave are the big baddies, but for most of their time in the Capitol Wastes, they are dealing with super mutants, and not just any super mutants. Really dumb super mutants. The super mutants on the East Coast are not intelligent, but one thing that is interesting about them is that the older they get, the longer they've been there. Oh, and there's many of them, but the longer they've been there, the more entrenched they are, and the older they get, the larger they can grow. We talked about this on the super mutant episode. there are super mutant behemoths in the Capital Wastes, and you come across them in the game. Some of them are very, very large. And a soldier in power armor with laser rifles isn't always enough to deal with this. A group of soldiers with laser rifles in power armor isn't always enough to deal with a super mutant behemoth. These things are huge. They pick you up, they squish you. I mean, you're like a tin can to them. So they're looking for solutions to deal with this problem in the Capital Wastes. So a gigantic robot. I mean, this is like, I don't know, Godzilla versus the giant robot from space or something. I don't know. But like, we're talking like B-movie sci-fi stuff here, right? But like, hey, why not? Let's recommission this robot. It's like our ancestors left us the salvation, like the right thing we need to solve this problem. But sure enough, they come across the same problems, right? After 20 years of tinkering with this, using their best scientists and their best engineers, they've only been able to restore 46% of the power to the internal processors, 45% to the weapons, and 37% to the management systems. And they've tried redistributing the power. They've tried using components that they've scavenged from the wasteland. They've tried rebuilding parts of Liberty Prime. And there's only so much they can do, but they can't get it back online. They're having a hard time. And on top of that, they've got the AI kind of working again. But again, the robot is confused. It doesn't understand why things just don't work, which is frustrating to the scribes. It's kind of driving them nuts, which has got to be interesting to be part of in some of those conversations, like Liberty Prime asking things about, like, you know, why are the communists tampering with my weapons, you know, like, or whatever. Like, no, Liberty, like, that's not what happened. It's just like, we can't get everything up online. It's nothing like that is happening, you know. Yeah, like, no, it's okay. It's okay, Liberty Prime. Just power down. You're good. You're good. But the robot didn't like this. This created some more issues, and they tried to fool Liberty Prime's subroutines. Like, they tried to actually fool the AI on the robot that when they tried to draw the power away from the weapons, that it was cool. It wasn't actually being drawn away from the weapons, but the AI on board detected the attempt and it fried out some of the circuitry. Like, it totally backfired, pushed the project back a few months. And then there was another attempt that was made later in July of 2277. And then there was another faulty power capacitor spike, which derailed things again and dropped power on board Liberty Prime down to the lowest levels that they'd had. It was up in the 40% and 30%, all the way down to 12, 13, and 1% respectively. Things were just tanking the project. So at this point, the Brotherhood started to get really desperate here. Now, the individuals who were working on this include Reginald Rothschild. So Reginald Rothschild was the head scribe. You may recognize that name from Fallout 3. And he was inspired by Dr. Madison Lee at Rivet City and used some of Madison Lee's research on accelerated vector fusion in order to try to come up with a breakthrough for this stuff. Well, of course, things didn't work out again and created an accidental weapon discharge, which almost killed Elder Lyons. Like, things went really bad here. And so they had to be even more careful. They actually imposed stricter controls on experimentation with the giant robot. So things are not looking good, but they kept working. And eventually they were able to restore power and improve distribution to the internal processors. And they got it up to 87%, and they got the weapons up to 60%. So the best levels they were able to get so far. But power management was still inefficient, and the mobility and navigations were just at 0% still. They couldn't get the machine working and moving, but the voice module still worked at 100%. So the robot was still talking to them. So whenever they powered the robot up, it was still saying all sorts of fun stuff and, you know, telling them things like,
communist threat assessment. Minimal. Scanning defenses.
and just like, you know, happy to fill them in on details, which I'm sure was driving them nuts. And especially because it was mocking the researchers too. And we don't have those lines in the game, so I can't play those. But can you imagine this robot being frustrated with not being able to walk and do stuff and he's like mocking the researchers on not being able to put his body back together correctly and power up his parts. I think that sounds awesome. So when the Enclave seized Project Purity, now remember the events of Fallout 3, the whole attempt to get actual clean water, and then the Enclave seizes things, and then of course there's the whole thing with your father and all of those details. Remember that? Madison Lee arrives at the Citadel, the base that the Brotherhood makes on top of the Pentagon, which was there on purpose. The reason they built that base on top of the Pentagon was because Liberty Prime was underneath it. That's why they chose that location. Not because it was the Pentagon per se, but because Liberty Prime was there. That was the main reason. Now, she was able to bring her experience directly to the project. It was no longer that her research was inspiring them. It was that she was able to work directly with Rothschild, and the two of them together were able to resolve the power management. So those two minds together were able to make it work. And then the robot was able to come online. And this is when you get to the end game of Fallout 3 and Liberty Prime comes online. And I'm not going to go into the details of the end game here because it's worth seeing for yourself. The giant robot up and working. And I talked about this before. 2 gigantic lasers shooting out of its head. Missiles, all sorts of things. Things stomping around, talking about communists and stuff. It's pretty great. So that's the events of Fallout 3. But at the end of those events, there is a situation where the robot is destroyed. The Enclave pushes back, and there's an event where poor old Liberty Prime gets busted up. So Liberty Prime basically gets blown to bits. And so they take what's left of Liberty Prime and they store him again for some future group to do something with. But it doesn't take that much time for some future group to do anything with them, because it's only about 10 years later that Proctor Ingram was ordered to resume the attempts to fix Liberty Prime in 2287 by none other than Elder Arthur Maxson of the Brotherhood of Steel in the Commonwealth. And so they take all of his components, they load them up on the Pridwin, and they move them on over to Boston. And not all of those components travel very well. So, as you know, things like CPUs, power systems, all of that stuff's pretty fragile. There's a reason why you put all that armor around the robot in order to protect those things. So not only was he blown apart, but a lot of those things didn't actually transit very well. So it takes them some time to piece this big, gigantic robot back together. But what's cool about this is that they've now got some more technology going, and they were inspired by some of the work that the Institute was doing. The Brotherhood was looking into the Institute, and of course the Institute were their enemies, but they knew of some of the work that they'd been working on and were able to use some of the technology that they had kind of backwards engineered from the Institute in order to redesign some of the components. So we legitimately get a Liberty Prime 2.0 in Fallout 4. They've redesigned like the actuators that move the robot's arms and legs. They use electromagnetic actuators for its body. and they redesign other components. In fact, the bombs, the mechanism that shoots and like holds the bombs is redesigned for Mark 28 nuclear bombs instead of the other ones that it was using before. And then the laser beam on the robot's head no longer shoots two individual lasers, but one larger laser that can change the intensity of its beam. Like they totally revamp the robot. And then even the internal components, the parts that have to do with the processing, the memory core, all of that stuff. So, for example, there were flaws in its original design. Lack of inertial dampeners and titanium shock casing to protect the memory core for the robot were added in. Things like this to make Liberty Prime even more effective and better. Now, the last step to bring Liberty Prime back online was getting its fusion core up and running. Because after it was destroyed, that part of it had lain dormant. That's the phrase here. It wasn't destroyed. It was just off. And it was turned back online by connecting it up to the power source that was powering the Prydwen. Now you have to think about this. The Prydwen was a gigantic flying ship. The power source to fly the Prydwen must have been intense. Keep that thing up there? Well, the reactor was a beryllium agitator. It was new tech. It was something that the Brotherhood had put together to get these ships working. So the power from the ship itself, from the Prydwen itself, was enough to kind of get the components running, but it wasn't enough to kickstart the fusion reactor, if that makes sense. So, for example, it'd be like bringing another battery to get your car running, but it wouldn't be enough to actually get the alternator to start, that kind of thing. So they needed something with enough power in it to really light the fire, theoretically, in the fusion generator inside Liberty Prime. And this was located in the mass fusion building. That would give the surge of energy needed to kickstart Liberty Prime. So they get all the components ready. Everything's upgraded. Liberty Prime is ready to go. The mass fusion building has what they need to kickstart the fusion generator. And boom, you've got Liberty Prime 2.0, or V2 is what they end up calling it, right? And it's back. And then you have the end of Fallout 4. And if you side with the Brotherhood, you get to see Liberty Prime come back with a head-mounted Liberty laser. They call it the Liberty laser, and a back-mounted supply of Mark 28 nuclear bombs. And you get to watch Liberty Prime walk around destroying stuff, and it's pretty freaking cool. So those of you who have played through that will know exactly how cool all of that stuff is. So there's some fun little details here about just some of the cool stuff around, just some of the little details that show up in the game around the way Liberty Prime works. And I love going over some of the, some of the nitty gritty stuff, some of the weird things that happen because it's a video game. So we'll dig into some of these things. So, so this one's fun. Prime is immune to all kinds of conventional attacks. This is in Fallout 3. So while Prime's walking around, so any of the shots and things don't actually do damage to the character in the game. And Prime can actually defeat the energy barriers just by walking into them. It just blows them up. Sometimes the robot will actually grab them and rip them down. All, of course, while spouting anti-communist propaganda. So that's pretty cool. In the games, the Liberty Prime follows pre-scripted paths. So there's not really, even though the robot itself in the lore has like an AI and can go where it wants, in the game, it's just a scripted path. It only goes one direction. Like you replay the sections, it'll never go a different direction unless the game messes up, right? So all of that stuff is scripted. But one of the funniest things that can happen in Fallout 3 is the robot, of course, can't be killed. It doesn't actually have like a health bar, even though it has something like 5 million hit points in the game. It doesn't actually take damage, so those hit points never go down. But if you do attack it enough, it can turn hostile, and it will attempt to kill you and your friends. This is possible in Fallout 3. It can happen. So maybe don't try to fight Liberty Prime, because you're not going to win unless, of course, you mod it or, turn on God mode or, I don't know, do something else, right? Now, in Fallout 4, it does some other cool stuff, including being able to walk in the water and also use its laser to like burrow into the ground, which is cool. But, and this is cool, you can actually target it in vats, which is interesting. It still doesn't take damage, but in Fallout 4, it doesn't actually turn hostile. But you do have the ability to accidentally or intentionally get underneath its feet and be trampled to death. So that is a thing that can happen as well. So there you go. That's Liberty Prime for you. 5 million hit points. And this is fun too. The Liberty laser in both games has a damage rating of 1,000. The bomb weapons, the basic bomb weapons, 200. And then in Fallout 4, there's what's called the bomb weapons special, which has 1,000 damage also. And it by default has the same bloody mess perk that you can get, which basically means whenever it does any damage to anything, kills it, if it just splatters everywhere. Of course it does. Why would you want anything less, right? So, oh man, good old Liberty Prime. Well, there you go, everybody. So, how'd you feel about that, Liberty Prime?
I am Liberty Prime. I am America.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I will be back next week with another episode. It will be our patron episode already. This has been a short month, but we'll be doing that on Tuesday night. And then we'll be back to some other regular episodes. So stay tuned for that. And until then, if you're out in the wasteland and a giant robot's walking around, don't tell him you're communist. I mean, even if you are, maybe you are. I don't know. Don't tell him you're communist, though, because he will shoot you with a giant laser and step on your head. All right. I'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody. To plug into everything else we're doing, check out robotsradio.net. Also, look up the Robots Radio YouTube for videos about Fallout and other things. And check us out on Twitter, twitter.com/robotsradio.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.